situated before we get started. So whenever you guys get ready, I'm going to let you guys know. But before we do get started, I just wanted to let everyone know that if you guys end up really enjoying my content, consider heading on over to my Patreon page, chipping in $1 or $2. Everyone ought to know by now that the YouTube ad revenue is just going into the toilet. So it would be really helpful if you guys would help us out and keep the channel moving along smoothly and freely, all that kind of good business. I've got 3 different plans here. You can just do a $1 PVS fan. It basically just gives you ad block forgiveness and my sincerest of gratitudes. And also I've got a $2 and a $5. So whichever one you feel like you're comfortable with. Also, if you guys are interested, I have also started doing these new t-shirts. So if you don't want to just do a general cash donation, just helping out in this respect, that way you get something out of the deal as well. I've got several different types, especially for us film guys. So if we're interested in doing the film stuff, you can now get this one by Film Nut Megapixels and Don't Be Negative. It's a little cheesy, isn't it? But it's still funny. And then I've also got this one. It's the world's okayest photographer. Let's just be real. Not all of us are just absolutely magnificent photographers. So this totally helps. All right. So I did manage to get the chat working on screen today. So if you want to have your comments and stuff here on the show, just feel free to say whatever you want. But don't be a dick. Try to act right tonight, guys. All right. So tonight we're going to be talking about film preparation. Okay. So we started roughly about almost 3 weeks ago. We were all going to start doing some film, and I have picked up a lot of film, and I am thoroughly enjoying my time with film. It's just exactly what you would expect it to be. Uncertain. You get used to digital, and all of a sudden you're thrust back into a situation where you have no immediate feedback as to whether or not you got your exposure correct. You've just got to kind of depend on your meters. You're not as confident in the autofocusing because you are having to do all the focusing. And so again, when I say autofocusing, I mean you're manually focusing. And I got to be honest, the Minolta X570 has been pretty damn good as far as letting me know when stuff is in focus. Some things are a little bit easier to distinguish between being in focus than others, but so far not really all that bad. I really do kind of like the focusing system inside the X570. It's kind of got this little kaleidoscope around the center so that you kind of know where your depth of field is. So everything that's in focus in the middle, you'll know that. And then the little kaleidoscope on the outside kind of solidifies the idea. So that's a thing. I don't know why I got a little bit of feedback there. But anyway, so now that we're getting to a point where we've only got about 10 days left before we need to start getting our film ready so that we can submit our new photographs. We're definitely going to want to do that. So I do have a couple of things here, including this, but I don't want to talk about that just yet. There are some other things that you're going to want to consider. Now, first of all, there's probably going to be a lot of you that are not going to develop your own film. I get that. It is kind of a pain in the ass. I do, in fact, recommend that everyone at least give it a try over a couple of rolls of film so that you can see what it's like. I mean, you really do have to kind of adventure just a smidge so that you can understand where your photography forefathers came from, because it is not easy. And a lot of people have no idea what it's like to actually develop a roll of film. So I definitely encourage people to at least give it a shot, So if you decide that it's absolutely out of the question, at least this time around, I did a video, and it should be up here in the cards, that basically gives you some of the best labs in the country to get your film developed. So if you're still in the middle of a roll of film, be sure to head out either tomorrow or Saturday, take as many of those leftover photographs as you can, and then make sure you send them on over to a lab. It doesn't really matter which one it is. Those were just my recommendations. They were more professional style labs, so they were not your traditional. They were not your traditional like CVS or Walgreens, drugstore type photo labs. But I'm going to give you a little tip. If you happen to have a Costco or something like that in your area, Costco actually does a pretty good job with printing. I have not printed anything with like Sam's Club's photo printing services, but I do have some limited experience with Costco. And for the most part, everything that I've printed out has been pretty damn good. So if you guys have any experiences with like Sam's photo printing or whatever, I usually don't print at those places, but it was just something that I wanted to bring up just in case you guys didn't have time. Okay, so again, if you're not going to print or process your own film, check this link right up here. There is going to be several different printing houses that can help you out. Relatively good prices too. So, but if you guys are planning to maybe tackle the whole process yourself, it's a little bit more involved, but it's not completely undoable. It's actually pretty damn easy. All right, so first thing will be you're going to need some supplies. Now, if you're going to be doing black and white is just a little bit easier. And I've got links to all the stuff that I'm about to talk about in the description box below. So if you need any of those things, please consider using those links. They, again, help the channel out. You're going to need 3 basic things if you're going to be doing black and white. You're going to need some general purpose developer. So this is what this is. You get 5. This is a 500 milliliter bottle. Most of these chemicals are relatively cheap. So you're going to get this one for about $18, $17.96 or so, depending on which country you live in. You're also going to need some stop bath. You get about 500 milliliters of that. This one will cost you about $19.50. So again, not bad. And you basically need the stop bath. It basically helps to stop the developing process from your developer. And so those are your first 2 chemicals. The next chemical that's going to be on your list is you're going to need some rapid fixer. And basically what this does is it affixes the image to the film. But before you even get to this point, you're also going to need a couple of other things. So you are, in fact, going to need some supplies. The first one is going to be a Heika black photography changing bag. Okay, you basically have to put your arms in these 2 holes down here, and you have to do everything inside this bag completely in the dark. You won't know any of it. You won't even see anything. So you'll have to do some practice runs before you get started, but you'll need one of these bags. You're also going to need what's called a 35 millimeter cassette opener. Translation, a bottle opener. That's what I use all the time to crack the end of your 35 millimeter film open. Of course, you're going to want to do this inside that changing bag. You're not going to want to do that out in the light, or you've just ruined your roll of film. So most of those bottle openers are ridiculously cheap. You can find them pretty much anywhere. And if you need any sort of reels, there's also a thing called the Patterson 35 millimeter, and I think the Patterson tank also does 120 film, and I don't know if it does 220 though. I don't usually mess around with 220, but the Patterson tank is a really good, solid choice. Yeah, here it is right here. It's the 35 millimeter tank. So this one usually comes with 2 different reels. So if you're putting your film inside the bag and you've cracked it open with your cassette opener, aka bottle opener, then you're going to want to wind your film onto these reels here. Okay. Once you get those pieces of film wound onto those reels, then you're going to want to put it into your light-proof tank. These are vastly improved tanks over what they used to be. So there are some other tanks out there. A lot of people don't really like the plastic reels. Some people have issues with them. Some people prefer to just be old school and use the stainless steel tanks. But honestly, a lot of people have had fantastic success with these Patterson tanks, and that is the one that I personally recommend just because they're widely available right now. The tank is light-proof, and you're still able to pour your chemicals down into the tank without removing the top. So those are some other things you're going to need. You're also obviously going to need some hanging clips. So if you don't have hanging clips yet, hanging clips are basically just these little things here that allow you to clip your finalized negatives onto it, and then you can hang it on a line to let it dry out. Some people also like to use a squeegee. I mean, there are plenty of them out there. The Patterson Film Squeegee is okay. I mean, it's only about $13.50. So, as you can see, it's a pretty involved process, okay? So, some of you are not going to want to brave the process, and I get that. I'm not going to hate on you because you decided against it, because it is involved. You are going to need a couple of other things, like a timer. You need to know exactly how long to leave your negatives in the film, or leave your film in these chemicals. So if you don't have a timer, you can use like a baking timer. They have some old school film developer timers. A little bit more expensive, obviously, but the timers are kind of a big thing. You need to be exact. You need to do all your processes exact, so don't go into this thinking that you can kind of fudge with the numbers, because you'll either get vastly different results or vastly, bad results if you don't do it exactly as the developer says. You're also going to need a thermometer. A thermometer is not exactly 100% crucial. You can be a few degrees off, but generally you want to get your developer, you want to get your chemicals and your water, you want it to all be a consistent temperature. That's the reason a lot of people do this in a very controlled environment, inside of a very dark room or whatever, because they don't want to ruin the film. And when you're shooting with film, you're always at risk of completely ruining the roll. Now, we've worked too hard. We've been doing this for 3 weeks. And no one wants to pop their roll of film open, get it wound on the wheel, inside the bag in complete darkness, and then at the very last second ruin it because we didn't have our water temperature correct and we didn't time the chemical baths correct. Also, you're going to need a couple of measuring cups, and when you do use these measuring cups, don't ever use them for food again, okay? Just don't. You never want to mix those chemicals in with anything food related. So never do that. Once you use these for your photochemicals, you just keep them with the chemicals and never use them again. So maybe get some plastic ones, some ones that you're not, you don't really care about. Also, you're probably going to need some scissors. Once you get your film developed and you've hung them up to dry with your clips, you've squeegeed them off, everything's looking good, you let your film dry after a couple of hours. You're going to want to snip your film into whatever size is going to be most appropriate, so that you can then put it into some of these archival pages. Now, that's if you plan to save your negatives. I can't imagine anyone not wanting to save their negatives, but these are pretty damn handy. A lot of people will save them, put them in a binder, tuck them away where it's nice and dark and dry, and save them forever, because I can't tell you how many times you can go back, check your negative out, and then reprocess the negative yourself, or send it off to a lab to reprocess it for you and add some extra options, whether you want to maybe push the film or pull the film or add a different type of effect to it, do some cross process. There's a lot of different stuff that you can do with your negatives years and years down the road. So you can technically get them developed once, but you can also redevelop them many, many, many times over the years and get something that's completely different. There's a good chance that you're going to want something to store your chemicals in, and I don't know if they've got them here right in front of me, but you can use these chemical bottles, and they're usually really, really cheap. I think they're only about $9. Ilford sells these. These are basically just jugs with a dark pigment to them so that no light can get in, because if you allow light to get into it, it will start to degrade the quality of the chemicals. So you put it in these darker jugs, you throw them under a sink somewhere, you just keep them as light protected as possible. So again, you'll probably need 1 or 2 of those. And there are a couple of different items out there that you could go. If you're planning on developing color, you're going to want something completely different than the Ilford ones. So I've got some Kodak color developer down there as well. But color film developing is way harder than black and white. That's the reason you're going to find more and more people, at least home amateurs, they just don't mess around with color developing all that often. It is a more involved process, and you don't get as much use out of your chemicals as you do with black and white. So all of these things considered, these are the things you're going to need to get started. It seems a little bit daunting at the beginning because you do have that sort of upfront cost, and if you do plan to do black and white film, the cost is not going to be as much for you over the long run. So in the long run, you guys are going to be much better off in the pocketbook department than you would if you were trying to develop color film. If I was shooting color film, I would just send it off to a lab. I wouldn't even mess with it, to be perfectly honest with you. Like I said, you just don't get as much use out of the chemicals. You end up having to throw away a lot of your used chemicals, and you just don't get as much reusability as you do with the black and white developer. So you might even want to use some dish soap as a way to help rinse your developer off. So that's a cheap option as opposed to using a stop bath. There's a lot of different little tips and tricks, and there are a lot of videos already out there on how to actually do the process. I have a few recommendations of my own. I'm going to recommend looking up Ted from The Art of Photography. He's done it for a very long time. He's got some fantastic instructional videos. Another guy that I really like is Matt Day. Matt Day has some fantastic tutorial videos on how to develop film, even how to do some more advanced stuff like enlarging, that kind of thing. I don't know that I ever plan to do any of those tutorials. I might if I've got the time. I don't know. I would be scared to death that I would go through that whole process, ruin a whole roll of film, and then you guys would be like, yeah. And then I'd have to basically delete my YouTube account. But I've got to be honest, I haven't developed film myself since, I don't know, I was in high school. So 20 years ago. It kind of sucks. I don't actually feel that old. So if you guys have any questions, if you have any concerns about what exactly you're going to need, if you have any questions about the process, I'll be happy to take them now. And as always, any question is relevant, okay? There is no such thing as a dumb question. There's only dumb answers, and I'm afraid I might give you one, but at the same time, I want us to at least have the chance to ask questions if we have to. But if not, like I said, I've got a list of some of the starting materials that you will need to get your film developing processes underway down in the description box below. So that should at least point you in the right direction and get you on the right path. And then if you need anything extra, because there are a lot of different little side items that you can pick up that will make the job easier, more efficient, will also make it more comprehensive. Because I'm telling you, this is not for the faint of heart. But don't be scared. I mean, you should definitely try shit that you have never tried before. And this is a worthy endeavor. I mean, you should at least do it once or twice to see where your photography forefathers came from. Because it was not as easy as just click, 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 1,000 times, and they go, yep, I got the shot. You just pick one out of the whole run. Then you clear your SD card, and then you're back to good. So yeah, a lot of people think that it's actually more complicated, but it yields so much better results. Because 35mm film is 35mm film. Okay, there's no finagling around the edges with how many megapixels are inside of a frame or whatever. 35mm film or 120 film, I mean, those are huge formats with massive amounts of detail, with massive amounts of character and different ways of processing. And I think that if you ever get the bug, if you ever get a real taste for film photography, and you process your own film, and you really develop a kinship with the process, I mean, it is something that is going to be extremely hard to deny, to ever get away from, because it makes you feel like you have been a part of that process from the moment you conceptualize the image in your head, to focusing the lens yourself, to adjusting the aperture and the shutter speed, to clicking that shutter button, listening to the film wind up. The tactile sensations are all over the place. The sounds, the smells of the chemicals, just the process. And then, of course, at the very end of it all, I did want to say that you don't necessarily have to do the full printing out of the photographs. If you don't want to go that far, you can stop right at the part where you have developed your negatives, and then you can use a flatbed scanner. As a matter of fact, Epson V600. So this scanner right here is the one that I personally recommend. It's the Epson Perfection V600. If you have the extra cash, I would even recommend going up to the next one. The next, I forget which one it is. I think it's the 800, the Epson V800. V550, yes, here is the Epson Perfection V800. Now, it is much more expensive, but it is a long-term investment. I'm not saying that you absolutely positively have to have a $700 scanner, but, you start totaling up all the stuff that you've got into your photography, and more and more and more of it will seem like, especially if you really get into it. Now, if this is just a one-off for you, if you don't really plan to do it very often, then absolutely 100% do not do this. Definitely just stick with the Epson V600. The V600 will, it's been around for a while, but it still works extremely well. It'll be a much slower process, but you will in fact have something to translate your negatives over into a digital file and put that on your computer, and then you can edit it in post just like you would any other photograph. Okay, so if you decide that you do want to develop your own negatives, and you do want to have some way to convert those negatives into digital files, please consider getting this one. The V600 is a fantastic buy. You can even get it used, for like $150. So not that expensive whatsoever, and you are basically going to be good from start to finish. If you take the picture or you buy the film, you could even wind up your own cassettes with 35 millimeter film, bulk film. Put them in your cassettes. You could take the shots. You could develop the negatives. You could scan the negatives, and then you could do all the editing and post directly on your computer without actually having to print it on paper. But you do have other options there. You can go and actually print on paper. You can buy photography paper, and then you can start buying all of your paper developing chemicals as well. So that's a whole separate process that I personally am not going to be getting into. I just sat around and I thought about it for the longest time, and I was just like, that is just not a particular topic or a particular segment of developing film that I want to get back into. It's just... digital for me is fine, and then I've always got the files here, and if I ever decide, man, this one just absolutely positively has to be developed, then I can always, send in a digital file of my real work, my negative photograph, and go get it printed on, some amazing paper somewhere else and do that whole thing. But so I'm just going to stay out of it completely. What's going on, Sully? Glad you decided to join the show right here at the very end of it. So I've got roughly about 6 or 7 minutes left. So if you guys want to, have a chat, if you guys have any questions, you guys seem like all of you have got it nailed down pretty good, and that's a good thing, because I know that there's probably not going to be a lot of you that decide to actually go forth and develop your own film, but it is extremely rewarding. And it does make you feel like you created everything. You weren't depending on, the camera manufacturer or the lens, or you don't have all these extra assists, is what I'm saying. There's no autofocus. This is not a digital frame. This is film, and it's all you. Everything from start to finish is on you. A lot of people don't like that much responsibility, and I get it. It's scary to pop a new roll of film in a film camera and have no clue what you're doing. But it's also very empowering. So for you guys to not ever have tried, for those of you that have never tried it, you owe it to yourself. At least a couple of rolls. Give it a shot. And genuinely experience the joy of taking your own film, developing it, putting it up somewhere, and saying, that was all me. So, Lost in the Internet says, how do you like Fuji and their film simulations? Honestly, I have not played with Fuji's film simulations yet. I'm still, to this very minute, still waiting on my evaluation copy of the Fuji X-T3. I need to get a hold of my B&H rep and tell them that maybe I should just get it later on, because apparently it's back ordered damn near everywhere. So I'm a little sad about that, but I've heard nothing but good things about Fuji's color. I've heard absolutely nothing but good thing about Fuji's film reproductions inside the camera. So, like I said, after hearing all that, I mean, I want to try it really bad. I have absolutely no experience with their new techniques or whatever it is they're doing, their simulation. People have said that it is so close to the real thing that it almost was good enough that they wouldn't even use it anymore. So that's kind of a thing, right? I don't know how well it would actually do in a one-to-one comparison, but I'd be willing to give it a try. I'm definitely interested for sure. So, and I do know a couple of people that have said, and this goes back to a video that I watched the other day with Dan Watson. Dan Watson actually said that the Fuji the X-T3, which is basically the X-T2's baby brother, said that the colors were just unfriggin' believable. And detail recovery with the RAW files are just sick. So, I mean, I am super stoked about getting my evaluation copy in, and I want it yesterday. But still waiting on it. Sully says, that's what I hear too. However, I have heard that the Fuji sensors produce some weird artifacting. I have not heard that, but in the long term, I don't know that would be a serious issue, because Fuji, for whatever reason, I mean, it's not like I don't know. They have just an amazing response time for fixing problems. Just look at the X-T1. There were just a massive amount of problems when they first released the X-T1. A few people bitched and complained pretty loud, and within, 6 months, every single firmware release that they had put out fixed all of those problems. So if there is anything wrong that can be fixed via firmware, I can assure you that Fuji will put out a fix for it. I mean, they are just that good. So, again, I'm super duper stoked about getting my evaluation copy in. I want it so bad, but I've just got other videos that I have to make, and if it's back ordered that long, then I have no choice but to say, all right, B&H guy, I need something different. So if you guys have any suggestions on what maybe I should be picking up, please drop those down in the comments down below. So if we don't have any other questions or whatever, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. If you need anything after the fact, just know that I'm always available to answer questions, and I provided links to all of the items that I talked about in this video down in the description box down below. So anyway, guys, thanks again for hanging out with me here on the Photo Video Show live show. Don't forget, support me on Patreon, and also don't forget that I have t-shirts now. So if you're a photography junkie, go check out my photography gear. The merch store is down below. All right, guys, I'm out. Peace.